In this video, we will be multiplying decimals. So you'll notice I have my steps over here that I am going to reference, and we are going to follow along and do the same question. So I'm going to start by going over the steps, but we will also see what they look like as we get to each one of them. So my steps are, first of all, to write vertically. We do not need to worry about where the decimals are when we are multiplying. In the last video, we did talk about we have to line those decimals up if we are adding and subtracting, but in multiplying, it doesn't matter because the decimals are going to have their own little trick that we use to figure out where it goes in the answer. Next thing we're going to do is to multiply normally, and we can use a multiplication chart to help us. So if our multiplication facts are not quite all there, or maybe some of them are more challenging, I know 6, 7, and 8 tend to be a little bit of a tricky ones. A multiplication chart will help us do this a little bit quicker. And then the last part, I'm actually going to go over once we get to the very end, because it's really only for the very end. So the first question that we have today is 6.25 times 2. So following my steps, I'm going to start by writing this vertically and not worrying about where my decimals are. So I'm basically going to treat it like the decimals aren't even there. So I'm going to have 6.25 times 2. Now, in order to do my multiplication, I'm going to multiply each number in the top by my number in the bottom. So 2 times 5 is 10. We write the 0 down and we're going to carry that 1. 2 times 2 is 4. And then we're going to add this 1 to get 5. And then 2 times 6 is 12. So I've done all my multiplication. This is where I'm going to go back to talk about this third step. So the third step says, count the number of digits behind a decimal in the question and ensure the answer has the same number of digits behind the decimal. So I'm going to look at my question and I have 1, 2 numbers that are behind the decimal. So I'm going to do the same amount here where I need 1, 2 numbers behind the decimal. And so my decimal is going to end up being here. So 6.25 times 2 is 12.50. Or if you do this on your calculator as a check, it's actually just going to write it 12.5 because I don't have to write this 0. We're going to do the next question, which has more decimals in it, just to continue our exploration. So 1.35 times 1.3. Now, as I go through this, I'm going to go back to step 1, write it vertically. You do not need to worry about where the decimals are. So 1.35 times 1.3. I'm going to make sure that I line these up across the back. Okay, so I want to make sure that this is flush, or that is level. Everything sort of butts up against that right-hand side. Now I'm going to do my multiplication. Here I have 2 terms down here, so I'm going to have to remember what to do in this situation. 3 times 5 is going to give us 15. Our 5 goes down and our 1 is carried. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1 is 10. So I'm going to put a 0 down here and the 1. And then 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. Now, once I get to this, I haven't multiplied anything by this 1 yet. Now, something that I like to do is I like to cross these off to remind myself I've already done that. Sometimes we will carry in more than one step, and then we kind of forget what we're doing with those numbers. So it's a really good way for you to sort of keep organized. Now, when we move over to this position, instead of multiplying by 1, what we're actually multiplying by is 10 because this is over 1 place value. So in order to honor that, we need to have a 0 that we bring down into our answer. So 1 times 5 is going to give me 5. 1 times 3 is 3. And 1 times 1 is 1. Now, if we hadn't crossed those out, sometimes if we're moving too fast, we'll try and add those. And so that's why I do that crossing off. I've dealt with all the digits here, so I'm going to add my answer together. So 5 plus 0 is 5, 0 plus 5 is 5, 4 plus 3 is 7, and here I have 1. Now we are down to this last step. So I'm going to count the total number of digits behind a decimal. So I have 1, 2, 3 in this case, because I have 1 down here as well. So that means that I need 3 digits behind the decimal in my answer as well. So I'm going to start on the right-hand side and I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, and my decimal is going to go in between the 1 and the 7. So I'm going to erase this to do question number 3 and 4, just so that we make sure that we have enough room. Question 3 is 3.1256 times 4.2. Now, you'll notice that that's kind of a ridiculous number of decimal places. It doesn't actually matter how many decimal places we have, we're still going to follow that same step process. So I'm going to write this. Now, sometimes when I have a situation like this where I have so many digits, I actually like to start writing on this right-hand side and write it outwards, just to make sure, or to line it up nicely across that right-hand side of my equation. So I wrote it vertically. I didn't worry about where my decimals were, so I'm going to start. So 2 times 6 is going to give me 12, and I'm going to carry the 1. 2 times 5 is 10, but I need to add that 1, so I'm going to have 11. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 2 times 1 is going to give me 2, and 2 times 3 is going to give me 6. Here I'm going to pause, cancel out anything or draw a line through anything I've already added. I'm moving over 1 place, so I need to honor that by bringing a 0 down, and then I can start my multiplication again. So 4 times 6 is 24. So the 4 goes down here and the 2 is going to come up here. So this is a spot where I could have gotten confused that maybe I had 12 that I was adding, but we don't have that. So that's why I like to cross them out. 4 times 5 is 20, plus that 2 is 22. And again, we see that carrying over again. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 2 is 10. We're going to carry that to the 1. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5, and 4 times 3 is 12. So I've done all my multiplication. Now I get to add. So 2 plus 0 is 2, 1 plus 4 is 5, 5 plus 2 is 7, 2 plus 0 is 2, 6 plus 5 is 11. I'm going to carry that 1. 1 plus 2 is 3, and this last column is going to be a 1. Now I'm on to that last step. Figure out how many spots behind my decimal place. So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers behind my decimal in the answer. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That means that my decimal is going to be going right in there. Now, if you're looking at this and you're not sure if your answer is close to correct or not, something that I like to do is a little bit of front end estimating. So that means that we only look at the front number. So I have 3 times 4, and I know that 3 times 4 is 12, and my answer I got is 13 point something. So this is a little bit bigger than 3 and a little bit bigger than 4. So if 3 times 4 is 12, I think that these two numbers multiplied together would make sense to be 13 point something. So something that you can do as you get better with this to sort of practice doing some of that estimating in your head. Question number 4. Now, if you're feeling confident with this, I would recommend maybe trying this, pausing the video and trying it on your own, and then seeing if you get the same answer as me would be a really good step to try now. If we were in our classroom, that's what I would have you guys do, is try it out and see how we do. If you're not quite there yet, you can follow along, no problems. So my first step, write it vertically. You do not need to worry about where the decimals are. Now I'm going to multiply. So 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 2 is 4. And 2 times 6 is 12. I don't have anything I need to cancel. And then I'm going to look at this. Now, I could go through and multiply each one of these by 0. But what's going to happen is I'm going to end up with a whole row of zeros. So when we have a 0 here, we don't actually have to do that second step of multiplying. We can actually just jump right to step number 3. Now, if you would like to show that step, you are more than welcome to, but just know that it's not necessary in order to get the correct answer. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits that are going to need to be behind my decimal. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it actually needs to go in between the 1 and the 2. So I'm going to move the 2 over just a little bit just because they're really close together right now. And so my answer is 1.24848.